what happens in a culture that's intact is not that we sit down and have deep conversations about death and grief. It's that death and grief are included in the stories of who we are and who our people are.
I think what we can learn from other cultures is their relationship to death and dying, and how important it is to have a relationship to death. Because that's what we're doing as a culture. We're like denying it. We're like, oh no, death isn't a thing. And that gives us more anxiety, more fear, all of those things. So we need to have a relationship with it.
We have forgotten what it's like to be with death and dying.
I think talking about our relationship as a culture with death, we kind of almost have to go back to the beginning in some ways, right? When you think about indigenous times, we lived within community. And when somebody died, we did it together as a tribe, as a community. Nobody died alone.
You know, there was a time not so long ago where death and dying happened in our homes and in our communities. People saw death and dying. They had to deal with it. The community stepped in. People used to live a lot closer to death. Not that it wasn't sad, not that it wasn't tragic, but they understood that it was a part of life.
And there was time to breathe into it. There was time to gather some ladies from the neighborhood, the family, the church, some sort of group, and those were the first undertakers. They were the layers of the dead. They would come and they'd bathe, and they'd sing or chant or pray or what have you and dress the person and get them in the living room, because our living room was our first funeral home. That was the parlor. Rather than go to the funeral parlor, the front parlor was what we did, and the person would be there. People could come, go. That person could also, they say, be a part of what's going on with the movement of the house and feel that their soul needed to kind of be collected and go with them when the time came. That also gave family time to construct a casket out of wood, dig a space, do those things, and you'd have meals and people would come visit and do what they needed to do, and everybody got used to death as very normal. It's in the house, the person is still in the house, and then they'll be just outside the house.
Around the time of the Civil War, embalming became more commonly used, specifically in the war to get the bodies of soldiers back home over long distances. And that became more the norm after the war. People started setting up shop. Suddenly there were these providers, there were these funeral homes, so death started getting moved out of the home and handed over to professionals. And this was happening around the time that the medical community was up and coming, and death was becoming medicalized, and birth was becoming medicalized. These were all things that used to happen in the home. So when Abraham Lincoln died, they embalmed his body, they put him on a train, and he went from DC home to Illinois on the train, making many stops in between. It showed that embalming was not a perfected skill. Apparently he was looking pretty rough at some of those stops, but it did expose a lot of people to the idea of embalming over several states. So that it wasn't just the Civil War and the soldiers going home, but it was Abe Lincoln himself took embalming on tour.
So as we've taken death out of the hands of families, out of the hands of community, a really high percent of people die in a hospital nowadays, surrounded by machines, surrounded by strangers, because we've become so fearful of it. And we've become fearful of it because it's been removed from our homes. And so if we can remember that it's a natural part of the life cycle and that we should be there to help our family and our friends and our community die, then that helps it to bring it into our everyday life. That's really important. I think the other cultures around the world that have more of these ceremonies and rituals, they have a relationship with death. I love talking about other cultures because I do think that a lot of them hit the mark more. One is one of my own cultures, being Mexican. When you think of the Mexican culture and how they will literally go to the graves and have a meal on the graves with their people. The Day of the Dead is one of the most important holidays in that culture. And so it really shows what their relationship with death is. I also like to think of my other cultures as being Irish. More ancient Ireland really had it right as well. There were wailers who would go and just wail and cry, and that would help to emote and help to get others who were at like a funeral or something like that.
There's such an experience of vulnerability that the idea that we're going to become spiritual geniuses at the end of our lives, is unrealistic, bordering on dangerous, because what I think some death-focused media that romanticizes dying, what it does is it doesn't quite prepare people to be with the mundaneness and the messiness and the labor of dying.
One of the hardest parts that I've noticed as far as dealing with death as a Black person in America is, one, the faith challenge. 70% or better of Black Americans state that they're Christian. Oftentimes that means that I get better. If I'm sick, if I have a terminal illness, that's not what God wants for me. I want to get better. The reality is, and this is what really drove me in this particular community, the reality is that I watched people pray. I watched them struggle in their faith, and they died. And to me, it did not dismiss the existence of God. It actually promoted the reality, because all through the scriptures, all I saw was how people died. And I go back to that Ecclesiastes 7:1 statement. The day of a man's death is better than the day of his birth.
I believe that the life cycle is our greatest teacher. I really, truly believe that. And so I want people to look at not only the earth and what we see in the seasons every single year go by, but when you are present with death, it truly gives you the gifts of what is most important. It gives you the gift of life.
I really believe children need to be involved. People think that kids can't handle death, that it's too scary, that it's too sad, and they try to hide it from kids. They also don't really know how to approach kids with it. Honestly, kids take it in stride. Their brains are just different. They're not there yet. They have very innocent questions, and it depends, of course, on the developmental age, and there's different ways to approach different ages, but so much of it is answering questions honestly, not saying things like that they're going to sleep, or, there's certain words, kids take things very literally, and it can make a kid afraid to go to sleep if they think dying is going to sleep. And we totally believe in kids being as involved with these things as they're comfortable. I don't think you should force a kid to be involved, but we also don't think you should not let a kid be involved, because that just creates more generations of people who are afraid of death and dying because they're not exposed to it and they don't know. We think that involving kids, letting them be with the person who's dying, letting them see the process, creates more death-literate future generations. It's really the only way forward, is to getting the younger generations involved in witnessing this now. They don't have to grow up with the same level of mystery around it and not knowing. It's hard, and I think when people just don't know, they just don't know what to expect, and we tend to fear what we don't know. Knowledge reduces fear.
What would it be like to take grief on as a teacher and a guide and a friend and a partner in healing? What would it be like to see death as a path to belonging, to connection, to meaningful legacy, to intergenerational beauty rather than intergenerational trauma?
It really wasn't until I got involved in helping people at the end of life that, I began to really understand that, this isn't an opponent of life. This is a part of it. Like, death is a third of the whole thing. It's the birth, the existence, and the death. And if we can understand that concept, I think we'll start to learn to die better.
I've always loved words for their history and what's hidden in the story of words. Bereavement, to be bereft or bereaved, yes, it means to be without, but it has the connotation of being without because something's been stolen from you. And one of the things that I notice, that there is a sense of injustice to contend with. There's a sense of unfairness, or that something's gone wrong, or that it was supposed to have been otherwise. But it says something culturally that we relate to the way that we are without in the wake of the death of a loved one as an injustice and a problem. We use the word to cope, coping strategies, coping skills. Cope comes from the root ku, which means to strike or to fight or to go to war with. We do often relate to grief as something to go to war with, just like with death, as something to be violent with. Even the language of cancer, to fight cancer, to beat cancer, and then to lose a battle with cancer, right? I mean, who wants to die with that?
It was such a huge takeaway for me to learn how important the support team's ability to be there and to be accepting of what's happening is for the dying person. How lonely it can be to be the dying person when everyone around you is needing you to fight and needing you to not be dying, needing you to continue to try to live, versus making space for us to be dying.
The human mortality rate is 100%. It has always been the same. It's never going to change. It can be a little scary to think about it, sure. Our brains are hardwired to live. So no matter how comfortable you get with it and how much you know about it, it's still, when you think about it in relationship to yourself, it can still be a little daunting. And it's always going to be a mystery as well. You can never know everything because it is a huge mystery. There's so much fear around it. I think a lot of it is people think it's really painful, a lot of physical pain. When you think about the majority of death and dying that we see is dramatized. It's war movies, it's slasher films, it's detective shows, it's ER dramas that are not at all accurate. Yes, death can be scary, death can be messy. There are definitely horrific ways to die. That is very true. However, that's all we see. We only see the worst of it. We only see the dramatized bits. I have seen many beautiful deaths, and people just don't know that that's even an option. Being aware of your mortality helps you appreciate your mortality. Helps you appreciate the life that you have. And knowing what your options are so you can have an end of life that fits who you are. All of that stuff, we could be talking about all that stuff all the way through our lives. Sometimes people fear death because they fear they're not going to be remembered, because they don't see that actively happening in their lives. They're not actively remembering their dead people. So encouraging people to do some kind of legacy work, to learn about different ways the family can continue to honor and memorialize them after they're gone, I think can take a lot of anxiety away, to know that they're going to be remembered.
That's another thing that is really important, I think, is for people to understand that we should continue bonds with people when they die. That is not happening in our culture very much either. Some people either think it's wrong or weird, like, why would you continue to talk to the person who has died? Why would you have an ancestor altar like I have? So this is my ancestor altar. I decided years ago that it's not only on the Day of the Dead that I want this. I want one all year long because I want to continue that bond and have that relationship with my ancestors. Those are all called continuing bonds. And I think that's a huge piece of what the Mexican culture does, is continue that bond. So I think that's what makes sense of having a relationship to skeletons, knowing that spiritually speaking, the spirit is somewhere else.
Part of where we start walking on pretty shaky footing is when we see the introduction of death into the world, into the human experience, as the result of sin and failure, and having done something that needed to be punished, right? So death as punishment is part of the problem. It's very difficult to approach death with an open heart or the hope for grace or wisdom, or the idea that death could be healing, that death could lead to belonging, that death could be part of a beautiful legacy that we leave for others in our lives, if we see death as intrinsically tied up with the idea of failure and problem and sin.
One thing that I knew is that the Black community gets most of their information from the church. So I actually developed a conversation that I could have in the church from the pulpit, helping them understand, listen, death is supposed to be a good thing for you, but also giving some straight talk. We're gonna die. But what I want more so for any of them is to not struggle with it. You know, it's the tears, it's the pain, even when they're by themselves. And I think that's also the hardest for me when no one else is around. I love being the person to sit there beside them and hold their hand and give them space to talk about whatever matters to them, because that's what matters to me.
If we've been told that we're bad our whole lives, if we've been told that we're sinners and that we have to work extremely hard to be saved, then we may not be sure of our destination, and we may not be sure if we're worthy of the goodness that we've been taught to aspire to. And I think that's at an extremely high bar and a tenuous place to put individual souls in. It's okay to be scared, and that it's okay to have doubt. And if we had space for that, and we normalized that, and we validated that, not as a failure of belief, but as part of belief, then I think we would be in a very different place culturally. Looking at all of this language of kind of adversarialism and enmitification, injustice, theft, this says something about how we relate to dying as a culture. All of our language and all of the subtext says, this is a problem and it needs to be another way. It's like, or it's exactly how it's supposed to be, and we need to figure out how to meet it in a way that doesn't bring so much stress.
I think one of the most appalling things in our medical system is that we just don't talk about death. We don't talk about the inevitable thing that's going to happen with people that have severe, serious, chronic illness. We don't talk about how they want to die. We don't talk about how they envision the last days of their life. We just make this assumption that everybody wants to live. And so we do everything we can without actually asking people, the patient, what they want. And it's maddening.
Because we don't educate people about what death looks like, the grief is much more complicated. And we don't educate people on what death looks like. We don't normalize it, we don't welcome it in, we don't hold it together and give it witness as a community, is because we see it as something to be ashamed of, right? And this is not just in the religious context, this is also in the medical context, right? These things could be allies, but they've actually been adversaries to dying well to this point, I think. At least for the last 150 years or so in this time and place.
Medical providers have to accept that end of life is a thing and it's going to happen and they can't stop it. Things that definitely need to change in our culture around death and dying are with our healthcare system, for one. Doctors grow up in the same death-denying culture as everyone else, and there's not a lot of education around end of life provided in medical school. It's all about make them live, you know, cure, treat, treat. And that's a huge disservice to people, especially when it's pretty obvious that they're going to die and they're not getting that in so many words from their doctor. And if you look at the end-of-life choices that doctors make versus what they talk to their patients about, it's very different. Doctors choose way fewer interventions because they know what people go through.
There was a time in my career where there was a definitive change in me as a physician, and it was actually watching my mother die. One of the things that really sticks out for me is watching all of the doctors on her team avoid the conversation about her impending death. She was dying, and nobody wanted to talk to her about it. Watching her die changed just the core of my being. It changed who I am as a physician. And watching her go through the process of dying and what that involved, and watching her move through the medical system and seeing just how broken it is, particularly for patients that don't have a medical person in their family, it made me a more compassionate, empathetic physician. As I've gone back to medicine after she died and had more seriously ill patients, I've started to initiate those conversations, and I'm surprised by the number of patients that have severe illness and their doctors have never had these conversations about the course of their illness.
The medical community, they don't embrace death and dying. Their goal is to help people live and live and live. And some people want to do that. Some people do it because they think they're supposed to do it. We can help people live a very long time with not much quality of life. So as doulas, we're not out to change anyone's mind about anything or come in with an agenda, but we are trying to give this lost knowledge back to people, back to families, to let them know what their options are.
I have made it a priority in seeing patients that I try to spend more time with them, particularly patients that I see frequently in the emergency department that have severe illness, that come in week after week after week, and their illness is progressing and getting worse. I sit down, I talk to them, I initiate a conversation about where they're going and how they want the last days of their life to look. What is important to them?
Many doctors, I would say most, I wouldn't say all, and I think this is changing thanks to some brilliant people who are working from the inside. They see death as a failure of their commitment to heal and prolong life at any cost sometimes, which is part of the problem. And so, what is it to approach death when your pastor or minister or priest and your doctor and your family are giving you subtle and not so subtle signs that what you're experiencing is a problem and a failure, right? It's very hard to be with the vulnerability of your own dying and then to do that with courage and wisdom without your people gathered around you saying, there is something here that's worth cultivating, there is something here that's worth showing up for.
Doctors are so well trained to help us stay healthy and to help us live longer, but not trained to help us die, to help walk with us as we die, to be able to be a witness to that process without jumping in and doing something. There's a lot of attention on the ascension, on the growth of a baby into a person, like the building up of the person, but the deconstruction and the unbuilding is so scary. And just the more we can integrate death and grief into our world and come to our own acceptance with that, the more empowered I think we can feel as small families and communities in bringing our people home and being the people who are taking care of them through that process. And we want the doctors and nurses involved. We need their care and expertise, but there is a time where we have to let people be dying. We have to let that process happen, and we have to be okay and accept that and be present with them.
A lot of people who'd rather not do treatment do because their family thinks they should. Because it's that prevailing must live at all costs. It's this idea that death is the worst possible thing that could happen. But the suffering and the things we've seen people living with for extended periods of time, I think are way worse than a peaceful death.
Most of us go into medicine because we want to help or we want to heal people. And there comes a point in everyone's course, in everyone's life, where you have to say, we've done everything we can, and now it's time to let this person die. And this is where we fail as physicians. Where we fail is in recognizing when it's time to stop trying to heal or save somebody, and when it's time to let somebody die a natural death in the most comfortable way possible.
The word doula is a Greek word that means one who serves. And in our role as end-of-life doulas, that's exactly what we're doing, is serving the individual with terminal illness and or their family in whatever capacity that they need.
We're members of the community who have some knowledge and experience around end of life, and we support people through that, whether they're healthy and planning or they or someone they know is closer to dying.
Doulas kind of bridge that gap between hospice and the families, because unfortunately it is a medical system for hospice. So, you know, they can't hang around for, you know, elongated periods of time, but a doula can stay right there. A doula can hold hand, and oftentimes families will tell doulas things that they won't tell the hospice care, you know, things that are very, very important. And doulas have this ability to, you know, get in even before hospice is appropriate. And I think that's where they're really valuable.
We help them navigate what support would look like for them, and it looks different for each family that we work with. That can be, I am struggling with even figuring out where to start in my planning. I am struggling with communicating with my family members or inner circle because they don't want to have these conversations with me. It could be I'm having trouble navigating my medical care team. What supports and resources do I already have and don't know how to utilize? Help dispel some of the fear that they might be having about, I don't know what dying is going to look or feel like, and that scares me. And even dealing with the emotions of I'm leaving people behind.
The role of a death doula so much is to re-empower families and non-professionals, but loved ones, to do this for their loved ones.
The most important thing I want people to know is to be your own advocate when it concerns how you want to die. You write the script. You tell people what you want. And I think in doing that, we'll create more peaceful deaths.
I am an emergency medicine attending physician at a level 2 trauma center that sees about 90,000 patients a year through the emergency department. I am very familiar with death. This is where television hasn't helped us, by the way. Where television has failed us, particularly in the medical dramas, is that most people who come into the hospital with sudden cardiac arrest that require CPR don't survive. And we go through multiple violent treatments at the end of their life. We push on their chest, we put in IVs, we put in big IV catheters, we put a tube in their throat, and it's painful, it's aggressive, and most people don't survive. The TV shows have failed us because they show all of these things happening, and then at some point the patient wakes up and they feel great, and you're like, that's wrong. That's not true. CPR is actually a pretty aggressive and violent act if you look at it purely for what it is. It's a person pushing on your breastbone in order to pump your heart, which sits halfway under your breastbone and your ribs.
It is rough, and I think a lot of people don't realize. They see on the movies, you know, this kind of glossed over version of what CPR is. It's not gentle, it's a brutal process.
The first time I performed CPR in a hospital, I was a first-year medical student, and the patient was an elderly woman whose heart had stopped. And the first push onto her chest with both of my hands, I broke her breastbone and most of her ribs. It's painful. And if a person survives CPR and actually survives to leaving the hospital, they leave with broken bones.
The first code that I worked at the fire department, so we got called for cardiac arrest, CPR. You know, we got there and it was in a care home, a care facility. The guy was like 96 years old, he was bedridden. You know, you're dealing with things like pressure sores from being in bed so much. You know, things that as a pet, I would be questioning quality of life. You would probably walk in and if you saw someone's dog like that, you would be like, what are you doing? You know, like, how could you do this to them? But for some reason, with people, that seems to be okay. And that's always kind of been a weird conflict in my mind. I would not put my dog through this. Why is it okay to do with people? Not only that, he was what we call a full code, so no DNR in place. They wanted full intervention, so I was the first person on the chest. It's a rough process, and for me, mentally, I was doing my job. That's what we're supposed to be there. They want full compressions, they want full CPR, we're gonna do everything the family wishes. But in my mind, I felt very conflicted about it. It was tough. I felt like I was, further damaging or injuring somebody who was basically kind of a long ways down in that dying process, that I was putting him through unnecessary pain for very slim chance of any good reward. I think it's really good to have very frank conversations. People need to know what they're actually dealing with so that they can make the right decision. Because I think if people were more educated about it and knew, they would be like, whoa, no, I don't want to do that. And sometimes those conversations just don't happen.
Patients don't want to talk about death. It's scary. Nobody wants to believe that they're dying or that their illness is going to kill them. And so it's establishing rapport in a way that says, I care about you, I care about what your quality of life is and what your wishes are. And I want to make sure that if you're in a position that you can't tell me what you want, that there's a document that tells people around you what you want.
We run into that on calls a lot. People don't understand, we're asking for their post form or their DNR, and they don't even know anything about it, or they don't have one there. They don't understand the ramifications of it. And I think if they had better conversations and was fully explained to them, people could make better decisions with that information.
So a POLST form, P-O-L-S-T, is a form that a patient fills out that has essentially 2 main sections and then a couple of sections on the back. The first part of the form is essentially if I am not breathing, if my heart stops. Do I want to have CPR or do I not want to have CPR? Not doing CPR means you are DNR, do not resuscitate. If you choose full code, that means somebody will push on your chest and give you chest compressions. They may put a tube in your throat if you're not breathing on your own. They may put you on a ventilator. If you drop down just below that, the second part of the form kind of tells us if you come into the hospital and you're really, really sick, how much treatment do you want? I work in a hospital that serves a very sick community. And sometimes I see these patients at the end of their life. We'll say they come in respiratory distress, meaning they can't breathe on their own. Ultimately, they will end up with a tube in their throat on a ventilator. If you can't tell me that you don't want that, I have to assume you want that, and the default is to err on the side of life. And sometimes that means very frail old people get CPR, where we push on their chest and we break their sternum and we break their ribs. And we put a tube in their throat to support their breathing and we damage their lungs. And so that form is important. I need to know what you want at the end of your life. As an emergency medicine physician, if there's no one there to speak for you, that form speaks for you. A lot of people have a picture of it on their phone. On the iPhone, you can hit like emergency contact and your emergency information comes up without your face or your thumb. Sometimes you can look through that and find it. A lot of people have it on their refrigerator. At home, as paramedics are coming through, they generally look on the refrigerator to see if there's a form there. Sometimes if you let your loved one know or your emergency contact know or they have a copy of it, we can get it that way. But if I'm being very honest with you, if you were to come into the emergency department in cardiac arrest and you couldn't talk to me and your loved one is not with you, I am going to err on the side of life, meaning I am going to attempt to resuscitate you until somebody can show me that form and say, no, he doesn't want to be resuscitated.
So my father just passed away only a couple months ago. He was driving one day and we think that he had a heart attack. They told us that they did CPR and resuscitated him. They said it took him one time and then they were able to bring him back and they rushed him to the ER. And as soon as I saw him and he's in the ventilator, I knew he didn't want this. But then as he would come out of it, you can imagine you have a ventilator into your chest and down your throat, and he would freak out. But he would just go like that, and his whole face was just this absolute, and was it terror? Was it anger? Was it fear? I don't know. Was it all? Probably. If he's in a nursing home or in a feeding tube, this is a man who swam almost every day of his life. He's an avid photographer, and there's no way he's going to be okay being in this place. And I said, he doesn't want to be in a nursing home. He doesn't want to be on a feeding tube. We need to make a change, and we need to not make people suffer.
Death isn't always the worst thing, right? I've changed my mind a lot, especially through Death with Dignity and knowing that we can have that as an option for people who are terminally ill. If you are suffering and suffering and suffering, who's to say that death is the worst thing? If you chose to live forever, because that's the only other alternative to not dying, right? We're either gonna die or we're gonna live forever. I can't imagine living forever on this earth. That sounds exhausting to me.
We want people to know about medical aid in dying options in the states that allow that. There's also, for the states that don't have that, there's VSED, which is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, which is when they either live in a state where they can't access medical aid in dying or they don't qualify for that. Maybe they don't have a definitive diagnosis that they're going to die from in 6 months or less. Maybe they have an early dementia diagnosis and they do not want to live through the entire process of dementia. They can choose to stop eating and drinking to end their life. There's a lot that goes into that. It's not as bad as it sounds to healthy people thinking of doing that. It sounds really painful and awful. If somebody is very debilitated, though, it's a very different situation. And if someone is very determined, we had a client who had watched her husband die from Alzheimer's over a period of years. And when she was diagnosed, she spent a good 2 years working with an organization here and talking to doulas and talking to people about VSED and about the process and talking to her family and talking to her loved ones and saying her goodbyes and getting that set up because she damn well knew she was going to do it. And it's a certain kind of person that these things really work for, someone who can make that decision and stick to it. That's where doula support can really come in because we can really help families walk through that. It's not commonly known about how to go about that. So I think people should have the right to choose to end their life sooner. It's not someone killing them. It's someone prescribing a large quantity of medication that they take themselves. They have to be of sound mind enough to know what they're doing and to be able to do that, to be able to ingest the medication. It's not something that can be done to them. But I think that option is really important. There's a lot of emphasis on physical pain being a reason why people would choose that. And sure, that can be a reason. Oftentimes with good hospice support, that pain can be managed, not always. The main reason that people choose to end their life sooner is fatigue and kind of loss of independence and just having dealt with all of these tiny losses that add up to not much quality of life over time. I don't think people should have to experience every moment of every bit of suffering that they could possibly experience if they're not having quality of life. And if it's not something a person would choose, then they don't have to choose it for themselves. That's a hard one in this country because a lot of people have a lot of really strong opinions about what other people should be doing that really isn't their business.
Even when families and close friends have the best intentions of being there for their person, not everyone has the capacity to be there.
Well, that's a place where doulas can really support people. The person who's dying is saying, "Don't tell my people I'm dying. I don't want them, I don't want them to be sad." And then the family members are saying, "Don't tell them they're dying. We don't want them to be sad." And so everyone knows they're dying, and then nobody's saying what needs to be said or having that real time, that real authentic time.
My grandmother and an ex-partner's grandmother, who were both women in their 90s, who I was very involved in their dying process, and both were in the hospitals. One woman, so grateful, ready for death when it came, really at peace with that, and her family was there to support her and surround her and walk her through the end of her life. And the other woman had a lot more fear, and the family was really uncomfortable with what was happening, and so it made for what looked like a really lonely experience of dying because she wasn't really allowed to be dying. It was really interesting for me to witness the care teams and how uncomfortable the people around the dying person felt about what was happening and how lonely that appeared to make it.
What a vigil plan does is kind of sets the stage for your final days when if you're, say you're dying at home or even in the hospital, wherever you might be, when you're not going to recover, you're no longer able to speak for yourself. It can be things like, what kind of lighting do you want in the room? Like if you're in a hospital room, maybe they can bring in some lamps and lose the fluorescence. If you're at home, maybe you want your pets on the bed. Maybe there's some music that could be playing. Maybe you want people to know that not to come in and talk about politics or sports. Maybe you want them to come in and share stories about you, things that you've experienced together. And it can be written up and put on the door of the room so that no one person has to explain to everyone coming in, be they caregivers or loved ones, how you want the scene to look. So we had a client who specifically had a couple of relatives that he knew would come in and just yammer on about things that meant nothing. And so his vigil plan specifically said, not to them by name, but specifically said, speak what's on your heart, share memories that we shared, talk about a time that meant something to you that you spent with me.
That's the biggest thing I hear around fear of dying. I don't want to be a burden to my family. If you don't want to be a burden to your family, make plans and make sure everyone knows what the plans are. It's really hard when there aren't plans, and so then the siblings come together and they're like, oh, mom would have wanted this, someone else thinks she would have wanted something else, and though the intention can be really good and full of love from everyone, it can be hard and confusing and difficult to know what she would have wanted because it's not laid out.
That's where we really get into more conversation about, okay, so let's get really clear on your priorities. If our window is closing, what are some things that you really feel like you need to wrap up or take care of? How can we help you get organized and prioritize these things to just alleviate some of that distress that you might be feeling so that you can ease into this next phase a little smoother?
Even before someone is on hospice, to be able to get in and kind of help them paint that picture, do legacy work with them. You know, what's valuable to you? What do you want your children to have? One of the most amazing things that I've seen is the ability to have families record, you know, what they want their children to know, you know, the things that are important to them. This is what you need to know in this world, and to have that available and recording and give it to them, it's so powerful, it's so amazing.
Are there stories you want captured? Are you a cook? Do you want to create a recipe book? Are you a gardener? Like some gardening tips, or help even create a garden with somebody that they can continue to nurture after you're gone. Speaking of legacy, I'll mention a story of a client that we had. She was in her mid-50s. She had 2 very young grandchildren that she knew she wasn't going to be able to see grow up. And she had so enjoyed mothering her children that she wanted to create what she called a grandma box for her grandchildren, where she and her kids would collect like games and card games and books and the things that she interacted with her own kids as they grew up. Put these things in the box so that they could experience grandma through those things, even though she wasn't there.
Well, I tell people all the time, I speak military, and really no matter what branch you were in, there are some things that are very consistent. So being able to have that conversation, to be able to kind of look back over your time in whatever training camp you were in, whatever specialized training that you received, and to be able to sit up here and look at a man soldier to soldier and say, I understand what you're dealing with, I understand what you're going through, especially as it relates to someone that's in combat. I think with men more so, having time to kind of generate a conversation that they wouldn't have anywhere because of the constant, you know, thought of being stoic, remaining so broad and strong. And sometimes it takes a while to have those conversations, you know, but for a lot of veterans, at least the ones that I've supported, having that conversation has been really instrumental into their dying process. One of the things that's more important as it relates to how veterans die as to civilian, we're inundated with this thought process that, you know, we're invincible, we can't be stopped. And then all of a sudden here comes some disease that we didn't expect, or, you know, something that says, you know, here's a place where I'm going to die. For a lot of veterans, there's this moral injury. Those that I've spoken with that have been in combat or some conflict, and they have this thing that they carry that says, you know, I didn't really want to commit this act or something like that. It went against my belief system, and I've carried it all this long time. And that it hurts. It's painful for them to carry that at the end of life, and saying, you know, if they're whatever faith they may follow, whatever spirituality they may follow, to say, this is something I want to be absolved of, you know, so that I can die peacefully, because right now I'm in pain behind this. I wanted to help stop that. I wanted to give a safe space for people to have those conversations, those real conversations, because oftentimes it's not available to them. I think I've supported maybe over 500 veterans in the last 5 or 6 years. And, you know, I have some that, you know, they're magnificent about their stories and talking about their patriotism, and some that just say, I don't want to talk about it at all. They don't even want to be honored. But for every veteran, it's important to honor their service. And I think that's the biggest difference, saying that you're valuable and what you did mattered and it counted. Even if you weren't in combat, you gave yourself to be ready for it. And I think that's so valuable. I just really try to assure them that their life has value, like it had meaning. Giving them a space to say, you know, it's okay to let go right here. I remember another veteran that I was supporting. It was a Vietnam veteran, and he was sharing with me about all the things that he had to do that he really didn't want to do. He also had some hate in his heart that he grew up with. And, you know, it took me sitting in that space with him for about an hour for him to be able to say, you know, he used me as a person to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the hate that I had. I'm sorry for all of those acts that I made, you know. And you could see the weight just fall off of him, and that gave him permission to die in peace. It felt good for me. And I think as a doula, you have to have the ability to hold that space for everyone and anyone. For this man to look at me and said that, you know, he was a racist, that, you know, he used the N-word and things like that. And I felt so proud to be able to hold that space for him, to give him that space, you know. Why not me, you know, to be able to give him that moment, to allow some freedom for himself so he could die well.
There are so many things that we can do with our body. There's the celebrations, there's the giving to science, there's things we can do with ashes, but it's really important for people to know that there's only so many forms of disposition. We can have a body buried at sea. You can have a body composted. You can have a body with a flame cremation. You can have a body with a water cremation. You also can be buried in a mausoleum, which is called entombment, and that's going to be above ground inside a building at a cemetery. And then there's burials, meaning you can have what we like to consider a traditional burial, because back in the day we would bury people in the farmyard, the backyard, the churchyard, and we have more of a modern burial, which would be the embalming, the metal casket, the huge tombstone, all those things. Now, when someone's alive, the beauty of pre-planning and pre-thinking about these things is you can have the conversation, you can get the education, you can talk about these things. And if somebody decides to take home their literature and say, this is really what I want, I tell the person, talk to your family and really let them know why you're resolute in this choice. Green burial is something that is legal in all 50 states, and it's merely just putting your body in a natural state, in a natural biodegradable container, in the natural earth. And then the grave space is important. The ground, doesn't matter if it's in a yard or a cemetery or where it is, it will be a space where you're going to be touching the soil, and you're not going to be surrounded. Your casket, your container, whatever, isn't going to have metal or varnished wood. It will break down. And then you're not going to be in a grave in a cemetery that has a polypropylene box you need to be into, or some sort of a grave liner or a grave box made out of concrete. It's actually something that will allow you to go into the earth. All 50 states have cemeteries that do this. Some have more, and it's something that is definitely feasible. What I tell families, if you call a funeral home and you talk to somebody on the phone and you don't feel like you're getting your answers, or you don't feel like they're wanting to talk to you about natural burial or any alternative methods, hang up and call somebody else.
And you'll hear a lot of doulas talk about a spirit leaving, a body. Some say they see an aura. Me, myself, it's just almost like an energy, like you watch it escape. In many cultures, including my own, when someone dies in the home, they'll say, raise their window so you can allow the spirit to go out, I think all of those things are very important. And it's important to say that, no one dies the same. I have seen what I thought was a spirit leaving a body, sitting in space in a hospital room. It just looked like an energy. You can hear it. You can hear it leave. Sounds like an exhale, almost like a drawing. And then to see what looks like an energy just kind of move away. And I don't profess to be an energy seer or anything like that. So many of my clients, it is the oddest thing, even if I'm not beside them, I feel them die. In so much that I've started giving a habit of checking the clock whenever I have this certain feeling, when I know that there's a pending death. And I mean, it's almost on spot within minutes. I'll call and I'll say, hey, and they'll say time was XYZ. And I was like, I knew it, but I just think it has more to do with my connection with those families, the time that we pour into, to be a part of that.
Older man in his room who was beginning to actively die, and he was reaching and he was engaging with someone in the room who wasn't visible to the family. And they had installed a video baby monitor in the room. So they knew that they saw him doing this, this reaching, this kind of engaging. And later when they looked at the footage, there was like a beam of light through the footage that they couldn't explain, that wasn't in the room in some way.
Even in modern physics has shown us that energy doesn't die, it changes form. And so trusting that whether we're talking about the way that my body will serve as nutriment for countless living beings in the earth and for plants and trees and flowers and the rest, that is a movement of energy, and that those plants and trees and flowers will also be enjoyed by or plucked by or used in some way or will be nourishment for other beings. I personally hold a little bit more space for the possibility that there is something in our consciousness that continues in a bit more of an explicit way. Not so much as an individuation, but as a directionality, as a stream of cause and effect. This is part of my influence in the Buddhist tradition. Seeing that as long as there is the desire for the continuity of being, the mind finds something to continue nourishing itself until it gets to the place where it's ready to let go. And sometimes I wish very much to be ready to let go, to be not only ready when it's my time to die, not just ready to turn toward the experience, but ready to really let go in a radical way, such that I don't feel the need to keep becoming. I simply hope that whatever my mind chooses to latch onto in the next go-round, that it is of service to other beings.
The Catholic in me wants to say we go to heaven and we get to see all of our dead relatives and be reunited. I don't know. I think what happens after death is whatever you believe happens after death.
Since we don't really know, I choose to believe these beautiful things where we're reunited with people who've gone before us, where we can kind of look back and see what we've learned, where your fear is gone, all these things that we have being in bodies, all of that is released. Because we can't really know, I encourage people to choose a belief that makes them feel comfortable with it, or makes them kind of look forward to it even. I know people are raised with some really scary ideas of what might happen when we die, and because it's a belief, these are all beliefs, not facts, you can change it. You can change your belief. And I mean, I've even heard a theory that what we believe is what actually happens initially. What we think is going to happen is kind of the first phase as we're leaving the body, that we kind of experience that.
I think there's a heaven. I think there's something that is greater that goes on. I would love to understand that this shell just stays here and everything that is Alvin and that has made Alvin continues to go on. I don't know. Maybe a little of me gets sprinkled out into the universe or something. I don't know.
Death is a gift in a way. It puts the exclamation point on our life. Yeah, it puts the exclamation point on our life.
Time is an old friend of mine, but lately I've been feeling the hands unwind. Things that break before they fall, words we say but can't recall. It's all there in the end. Just promise you'll lay me down when I go. It's just scatter me in the ocean. It won't matter when I'm ghost. Leave me buried in snow, and I know